So I wanted to introduce you to this assignment by showing you different artists who do a very similar thing. Um, and keep in mind, this is different than a monochrome. Monochrome would be when you take one color and you tint and shade it, so you darken it and then lighten the color. And this is different. This is basically a black and white drawing that then adds one color element to it. It's a single color, but it's not exactly monochrome. Um, so you should be asking yourself, like, for instance, with this drawing, if you were to remove the color and then what does that look like versus adding this color? I mean, what does it do? I mean, it creates a focal point. It adds maybe a little bit of tension, kind of gives it a bit of little quiet reserve kind of drama. Um, One thing that I like, the reason why I like doing this assignment is because I like to show people that, um, it's good to try not to let the color distract you too much from the drawing. Um, Lots of times you still, no matter what, even when you're working with color, you have to have the drawing be right. You still have to have the values be correct and not get too distracted by the color element. And sometimes the color element can be just a little dab will finish the drawing. Doesn't always have to be everywhere. Here's another artist, and I have to admit, I think this is done in paint. When I look at some of the scraping here, it looks like it was paint that was scraped on with a palette knife. But it's the same effect, except this is different, where the Degas drawing was showing you on one object. Here it's sort of the atmosphere is the colored element, and it's everywhere too, or not everywhere. It's not reserved to just one object. It's filtering in here. It's filtering in here. It can create, so it can be an atmospheric kind of element as well. So this is something that I make students do in figure drawing. I always make sure before we move on to full color that they should consider working with one color and adding it to their black and white drawing. So it forces them to just, and I always tell them pick a warm. So the classic example is using like this kind of brick red color, um, and adding it to wherever you see the temperature get warm, and then when it gets cool, you're gonna have to use the paper or the black, and this keeps the students from getting distracted and overwhelmed from the color because they still have to keep in mind that the drawing still has to be correct in the sense that the shadow side still needs to be dark, the light side still needs to be light. Sometimes when you give students color, like, they get distracted by the color. Like, if you let them just use the full palette, they'll start throwing in violets and greens, which is good. You should be able to work with lots of color in a figure drawing, but let's say you put in some greens or violets over here, the greens and violets still have to be light, and if you put them over here, they still have to be dark. You can't have them sort of distract from the drawing. Here's another example of using reserved color. You can tint your paper. This looks like it was tinted maybe with acrylic paint, and then a pencil drawing or charcoal drawing, just a little bit of temperature shift starts to put some blood in the figure. See it in the cheeks here, a little bit even in the shadow. So this is probably more than one color. It looks like it's like a peach and a little bit of magenta, but still, this is a similar thing I make students always do, is make them complete a black and white drawing and then add in a minimal amount of color so that they don't get distracted. Here's another example. This is done, looks like pencil, and I know this is color pencil. So one color here looks like just the magenta. Here it looks like it's several. It looks like the pink magenta with a little bit of like peach here. But still, even if you were to remove the color, it would still hold up as a drawing. The color isn't the color is sort of almost like I kind of almost think of it as like a cosmetic add-on. It's just a little bit of filtering in. Here's an artist who's sort of doing the same thing here. This is colored pencil. So the red shirt has the color pencil, and then also he's skimming it. It's hard to see, but he's skimming it in the face too, the same color, even in the hair, to kind of give it a little bit of blood in the figure. This artist, the materials are listed as charcoal and spray paint, and it's kind of a bizarre image because it almost looks like it may be arbitrary, or maybe the figure's being hit by a yellow light. It's a little unusual. Now this one is a peculiar one where if you look closely, you can see that the drawing has been seamed together from multiple pieces of paper. You can kind of see the seams here, which is something I always say you should feel free to do if your drawing needs to expand and get bigger. You should always feel free to seam it and expand it any way you need to. And here, this almost looks like spray paint too. It's done right on the edge of the composition. Now, I mean, you should probably ask yourself, like, what exactly is this doing? Is it just an arbitrary use of color? Arbitrary meaning random, just based on personal choice, a whim, rather than any specific reason. It could be, maybe there was some spray paint on the ground. I don't know. Maybe they are being literal. There is kind of a bizarre thing where, like, I think this drawing is kind of think about the subject matter. It's this transition space of this figure exiting a vehicle or entering, and I kind of feel like the drawing itself kind of has this bizarre kind of. You kind of think of the edge of the drawing as also, it's another sort of transitionary space, and the blue sort of hugs the edge of that transitionary space, which I kind of feel like it's echoing the subject matter a little bit. James Jean, real popular illustrator, sketchbook page. I like how just free-flowing this is. I like these little landscapes and these negative spaces here. And just kind of dressing it up with one color. And it does add something. I mean, you can try to imagine this all in black and white. The blue kind of directs your attention throughout the whole composition. Anselm Kiefer, German painter. He well, and sculptor too. He does a very bizarre thing where he uses real materials in the paintings. I kind of almost feel like the paintings are just like his sculptures. He just happens to put them upright and a little flatter. But let me read the quote here. I was always interested not to use color as illusion, but as material. So he does this thing where he deliberately kind of thinks of the color as not like an illustrative device, but as an actual thing. So the yellow is actually the yellow hay. He didn't, illustrate yellow hay. He actually just put it in there. I mean, when you think about it, like all paint is really material. He's just being a little more literal with it here. Again, just mostly black and white with just a little bit of orange. So again, let me show you another example where he's doing a similar thing, where he does all kinds of weird things where he'll pour like metal and chemicals, and so he'll stain the surfaces. And here he's actually putting it's like a model of a ship, and then I think, like, for instance, like the color is the rust. It's like this is like an actual rust starting to form on the surface of things, and so that's the color elements. It's a literal rust. And again, like that's what paint is to some degree too. Sometimes you can literally get like like red oxide. It's oxidized minerals that's actually starting to have like a rust element in it. Here he just, instead of illustrating with the color, the color is just what the material is. Another one with a little rusty ship. But again, he's being reserved with the color. It relates to this assignment in the sense that it's mostly a black and white image with one colored element, which is the rust. This painter, I don't really know much about her. She mostly does, I think, oil painting. There's one little illustration that I liked. Looks like watercolor, ink, graphite pencil, with one colored element here. I don't know if that's pencil or watercolor. An illustrator. Now, one thing, and again, I like this example because it's opposite of what we've been seeing. A lot of times, we've been seeing the color in one spot. Here, it's the color's more kind of everywhere. A lot of times, illustrators have to be very economical and fast, and they need lots of tricks to be quick. And keeping the color down to a minimum is one way to be quick with color. Same artist. Nice focal point with the color. Jim Dine. Now, I know there's more than one color in here, but for the most part, you could say it's just green, even though I know I see more than green. This is a really good technique, which I recommend you should try, where he does a charcoal drawing. So he figures out his composition, figures out his drawing problems, and I would recommend probably spray fixing it so then the gray doesn't mix in with your color, and then after he does the charcoal drawing, he skims on the color on top of the charcoal drawing. Again, I know there's more than one color, but you can kind of see the idea of mostly a black and white drawing with just a little bit of color. But I hope you understand what I mean by you would have to, if you do this, you have to spray fix it. Otherwise, if you start to smear on yellow pastel on top of gray charcoal, the gray will start to mix in with your yellow unless you spray fix it first. Ed Ruscha, very popular LA artist. He's still alive and still working. I always like these letters that he would make. He would literally cut it out of paper and illustrate them, and then here's your one. Even though there might be more than one color in here, but it looks like it's just yellow to me. I like this one because it illustrates exactly what's going on very clearly. You see the orange fire and the light hitting one side of the figure. This is an artist named Jerome Witkin. I think this might be a study for a painting, and I know there's probably like magenta and that kind of red brown in here, but for the most part, I think you get the idea of black and white drawing with hints of color. This is something good to do if you're about to start a painting, is once you kind of do a drawing, maybe spray fix it and then take out your pastels or color pencil and start to skim in a little bit of color to try to figure out what color scheme you're going for in the painting. This one artist, I pull these off for Instagram. She does this a lot, where these sketchbook drawings and then picks one color. Sometimes she does this in blue with color pencil. Just skims in a little bit of color. And I forget the name of this artist. I found this one. I thought it was kind of a fun composition. I like the wonky perspective. And that looks like marker to me. Sean Tan, the illustrator, he's the one I posted that video of his thought process and when he's working. And again, I know there's more than one color, but for the most part, it's a black and white drawing, which is still one color for the most part, the orange, if you ignore these two here, and if you ignore the blue. But again, it's like sometimes a little bit of color is all your image needs. One color is kind of this kind of magenta color. It's everywhere. It's kind of even in the hair slightly. It adds. It makes it just look like the color. The figure has some blood in their skin. And I forget the name of these artists. Sorry, but sometimes the color can be mainly the background. It looks like charcoal to me. Nice drawing. Good clear sense of form, clear lights and darks. Nice one. I think this was done in a ballpoint pen, but just red, black and white with the red added. And I like how the red kind of glows and goes on to the hands. This is the last one. This artist, again, to be clear, this was actually done in the computer. She had this drawing, scanned it into the computer, and then started adding shades of red. Um, lots of different reds. Darker reds, pale reds, and I was trying to think if you were to try to do this with actual material, not in the computer, could be tricky because I mean, if you were to paint this on with ink or watercolor, you'd have to be careful not to have the pencil sort of mix in, because then it would start to smear in and muddy up your red. You could spray fix it, but I've always found that once you spray fix it, watercolor and ink tends to not want to go on top. I'm trying to figure out how could you do this in real life. I don't really know. But yeah, sometimes you need to. This is a very common illustration technique of scanning a drawing and finishing the color in the computer, which we're not going to be doing any computer work in this class, but I just wanted to show you some other examples.